Welcome everyone, I'm Dale and this is CinemaHistoria. Another request this week, and this one taken from a Cosmopolitan 1935 short story turned into a movie called Wife vs. Secretary, a comedy drama from 1936 starring Clark Gable, Myrna Loy, Jean Harlow, and James Stewart. So where does our story begin? Van, played by Clark Gable, is a magazine publisher. And his wife, Linda, is played by Myrna Loy. Now, Van has a very pretty secretary by the name of Helen Wilson. They call her Whitey. She's played by Jean Harlow. And Whitey has a boyfriend by the name of Dave, played by Jimmy Stewart. So one day, Van gets a visit from his mother at the office, and his mother notices that Van has a very pretty secretary. She thinks there's a lot of temptation at the office, and so much so that she informs Linda that, saying that maybe Van should consider changing secretaries. Well, Linda doesn't think too much of the advice, and she says they're even planning a vacation for their third wedding anniversary. Anyway, back at the office, it's business as usual, but Van notices that he's losing some business to a lower-priced publication, and it's one of his arch rivals by the name of J.D. Underwood. So he approaches J.D. and says, I'm thinking of coming out with a lower-priced publication myself. J.D. says, well, why don't you just buy my publication? It's already established. I'm looking at retiring anyway. So back to the office, Van goes, and him and his secretary work some long hours to see if this deal is worth making. In the meantime, J.D. flies down to Havana for a conference. So Van decides that the purchase is worth it, and he flies down to Havana to try to solidify the deal before his arch rivals get wind. And there's a lot of work there, so he calls upon Whitey to fly down and help, which she does. So it means a lot of long hours and so forth. And Linda, by this time, is a little nervous. And she's been calling down to try to get hold of Van with no luck. She does get through to his room, though, eventually at 2 a.m. in the morning. And of course, it's Whitey that picks up the phone. Of course, now Linda thinks that her husband is having an affair. So, does Van have an affair or not? Does he stay married or not? Does he make the purchase for the publication with J.D.? And does Dave still have a girlfriend? There's a lot of chemistry on screen with this movie, and for good reason. This movie is one of 6 collaborations with Clark Gable and Jean Harlow, and the movie is also one of 7 between Clark Gable and Myrna Loy. And the director, Clarence Brown, was another one of the big directors during the golden era. He started making movies around 1920 in the silent movie era, and then right through from the 20s, 30s, 40s, ending in the early 50s, his last movie being Plymouth Adventure in 1952 with Spencer Tracy. Now, during that time, he gained a total of 38 Academy Award nominations, and he earned 9 Oscars. Yeah. So, a little more history and a trivia question coming up next. Yes, we're looking at mechanical adding machines today as a history lesson. There's a scene in the movie where Van and Whitey are doing calculations in order to make a purchase on the other publication, and they're using an adding machine similar to this one. Now, as far as adding machines go, mechanical ones anyway, there are actually surviving notes that date back to 1623 on attempts on making them, but with no avail. That changed about 2 decades later in 1642 by the name of Blaise Pascal, and he had worked out some of the issues that they had earlier. And after 3 years of effort and 50 prototypes, he brought out his adding machines to the public. He built 20 of these machines in the following 10 years. Now we move forward again to the Burroughs Corporation. This is a Burroughs model, and this model was built in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Now the Windsor plant opened in 1965, so this is a mid-60s model, but very similar to the one used in the movie. But the Burroughs Corporation began in 1886. Now they not only made adding machines, they also made typewriters and printers. And by 1904, it was the biggest adding machine company in America. Now, production of mechanical calculators ended by about the mid-1970s, but it closed off an industry that had been around for 120 years. There is some, you might find interesting, some pulp culture that dates back to the mid-1960s to television programs. The P205 console model was used as computers. Now, I watched this one from 1966 to 1968. It was the Batman series, and it was used as a bat computer. It was also used in series like The Time Travel from 1966 and 67, Lost in Space from 1965 to 1968, and also a TV series called Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea from 1964 to 1968. Pretty neat. Now, the trivia question is a question I've been wondering about myself. So, was Jean Harlow a good kisser? Well, Jimmy Stewart thought so. There was a scene in the movie where they had to do a romantic scene in the car. This is with Jimmy Stewart and Jean Harlow. And this is a quote from Jimmy Stewart. Clarence Brown, the director, wasn't too pleased by the way I did the smooching. He made us repeat the scene about a half a dozen times. I botched it up on purpose. That Jean Harlow sure was a good kisser. I realized that until then, I'd never been really kissed. Boy, that's a lucky guy. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope to see you back next week.